It'll all work out. You'll see already. In the end, it's all nice.
Summer, fall, and winter serve as the three-act structure in Requiem for a Dream, a film whose core ideas are manifested by its violent acceleration of intensity. Alone, this manner of narrative assembly may not act as a radical approach to any kind of filmic framework, but the introduction of 4 branching character arcs transforms Requiem into something truly unique, where following the stories of 4 individuals may lend itself to 4 separate forms of storytelling. Director Darren Aronofsky opts to create a nexus in this quartet of chronicles, not only through their interpersonal relationships, but by an interconnected structure where camera work individualizes and editing smashes together. Requiem's filmmaking is bombastic. The aggression in its camera techniques serve to reinforce its narrative structure. Aronofsky crafted his sophomore piece with more inclination towards musical structure rather than taking inspiration from conventional cinema. In essence, Requiem for a Dream is a 100-minute crescendo climaxing in the final 20 minutes. Assembling a film in this way not only allows the editing and camera work to emphasize the present moments of image, but they actively propel the narrative further. As the techniques build in their ferocity, they begin to coalesce as we reach closer to the conclusion. Through the symbiotic relationship between the filmmaking techniques and the narrative structure, what begins as a filmic style becomes the foundation of the movie's message.
You are beautiful. You're the most beautiful girl in the world. You're my dream.
From beginning to end, Requiem continues to introduce methods of filmmaking that haven't been utilised in its lexicon up until that point. But what I think is the standout factor for Requiem in this regard is that it uses all the cinematic language that we're familiar with, yet they function through a lens of distortion. Rather than dissolving from one scene to another, pieces of a building slowly fade away, and instead of an ordinary tracking shot inwards, we're greeted with this frantic movement.
It's Harry! Oh, look who's Harry! Oh!
Hey!
This kind of filmmaking yields 2 major results. The first is that we are submerged directly into the warped mind and twisted experiences undergone by our characters.
Shut up.
The camera retains 100% subjectivity at all times, acting as the mind's eye of the subject. And secondly, perhaps most importantly, what's also presented to us is the malleability of cinema. As the film advances, its techniques go against our expectations. Something as simple as a time-lapse can appear restrained 1 minute and altered upon its next appearance. Requiem's capacity to modify its own techniques creates a foundation that over the course of the film, they can evolve and will change. And the story will be told from how the film becomes amplified through the transformation of these techniques. In order to capture the subjective perception of each character, Aronofsky uses the techniques of Requiem to signify each story. He administers new styles to enrich each subject's experiences, making a clear distinction that the cinema screen does not present to us an objective reality.
So I think all the film techniques we didn't want in any way to be accused of being an MTV movie. Meaning, I mean, that's the worst insult you could give me, because those videos and those commercials are basically style without substance. And when you make narrative film, you have this theme, which is your mantra. You have something that everything has to be based on. So every single camera technique we use, we tried to base in the truth and in the honesty of what the film was about.
The camera must show us what is true to the characters. In turn, it becomes an extension of them both mentally and physically. Aronofsky takes this to the ultimate degree of immediacy by having the camera literally attached to the subjects. The resulting hypnotic effect is that the camera moves, shakes and trembles exactly as our characters do. The connotation being that the camera's relationship to the subject is identical. There's no differentiation between either, thus every technique we see is a form of exhibiting that character's interior identity. The camera is an immaterial entity for the audience to see what the characters feel.
Oh, my fucking arm!
For instance, in Sarah's story, the lenses used gradually grow wider and wider. She begins to fill the screen more and more until her physical form becomes a monstrous replicant of her mindset.
The refrigerator.
Nothing wrong?
The camera continues extrapolating the story of the individual, used in such a way that it reveals a concealed humanity underneath an enduring crisis. Here, it implies an increasing claustrophobia Sarah feels in each space. These are 4 separate people chasing their own dreams, and the failure of achieving such has resulted in complete isolation. This is evident from the opening scene.
Mark, come on, man. Why do you have to make such a big deal out of this, man? You know you'll get the set back in a couple of hours. Why you gotta make me feel so guilty, Ma?
The use of split screen is very interesting because of how it takes up the actual space of the screen. The frame is still shared by both individuals. If it were a single shot, it would indicate an equality to one another. Both subjects would be on the same plane with an equivalence of image. Yet through disrupting the filmic space, although the subjects maintain a likeness to one another, the experiences that each has becomes unique to them. Their seclusion, a display of how truly alone they are. This technique is most effective in the scene where 2 of our protagonists share a moment of tenderness together.
I always thought you were the most beautiful girl I ever seen.
Really?
Although they are with one another, the division of their experiences makes this a fabricated feeling of intimacy. Aronofsky isolates his subjects first before they collide together. The catalyst for Requiem's ability to unify its story comes primarily in its editing, and the most frequent and salient editing technique comes in its volatile depiction of drug use.
The challenge of the film was to connect the kid's story with the Sarah Goldfarb story, and I connect them through what we call hip-hop montages. The idea is to take, sharp sounds with sharp images and put them one after the other and basically form almost a musical piece. So the first few images are the kids, Harry and Marion, getting high, and that transforms into Sarah Goldfarb drinking some coffee, popping a pill.
But what are these scenes showing us? First of all, we have a rapid succession of cuts in a short time frame. The quickness this evokes means that the sequence is over before we even get a chance to fully grasp what we've seen. On the other hand, these sequences appear so often that they become the film's major motif. They take up such a large portion of the film, yet when isolated, they're hardly even noticeable. The ability to overlook them emphasize how fleeting the euphoria of our characters' addiction is, yet their ubiquity makes them simultaneously obtrusive, as scenes seem unable to reach an equilibrium without their inclusion. In regard to the entire piece, the velocity and frequency in which these moments occur indicate that the feelings of bliss they bring are so brief in comparison to the despair they cause. And if we take each individual shot, all of them are extreme close-ups, even down to an atomic level. These objectively tiny details are magnified infinitely to our characters, filling the screen. The implication is the weight these thoughts have, that something as seemingly insignificant as the sipping of a coffee can be the only thing that our characters can visualize. Even further, they're fueled by a sound design where the effect we hear is not any kind of real, but artificial. A simplified and illuminated sound to punctuate the kind of yearning our characters have for their vice, we begin to experience the exaggeration of all their senses acting against them. The shots and arrangement of the montages emphasise the characters' addiction. What they yearn for is larger than anything they could possibly imagine, yet the effective montage makes it pass so quickly that there's no time to experience any of the temporary enjoyment it may offer. The characters are chasing an impossible dream, and this abstract, unattainable force becomes the template for how Requiem proceeds to unravel. As the film progresses, its fierceness causes all of the techniques we've seen up to that point to crash into one another. The movie races towards its finale at a velocity that the film itself is unable to keep up with. The sounds from one story begin to lay over another.
Okay for work. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yes, sir.
Okay for work. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yes, sir.
Okay for work. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yes, sir.
Okay for work.
The montages were a visual indicator of striving towards an unachievable dream, their emergence indicative of our characters succumbing to their addictions as a crutch and a fervent hope. If these sequences showed us our characters' attempt at recapturing a dream, then the finale is the inevitable collapse of it. As the climax treats us with an onslaught of imagery, the subjective point of view of the camera shows that our characters are propelling themselves in a downward spiral as they were under their drug use. However, now, their vice is no longer physical. Prior to this, each quick succession of cuts was a decisive moment for our characters, whether or not to chase their fantasy, some moments even coming with brief hesitation. Yet ultimately, they were unable to let go of that which is destroying them. The visual metaphorically conveys the endless search for purpose to actions. The finale jumps between scenes faster and faster until it resembles one of the previous montages. The search for purpose has led their entire lives to become suffering, and the furious editing represents their clawing to find reason for it, just as they did with their addictions. Caught in a collapse of their realities, the characters hurtle towards the end of their fantasy, having lost all control. The search for fulfillment has engulfed our characters, and the longer they hold on, the further down it shall drag them. Even during their moments of drug use, our characters displayed separation in their experiences, yet now, they aren't distinguishable from one another. Their worlds have all coalesced into the capitulation of their vice, a dream. The final act reflects the hunt for that which may fill the void we feel, until the unavoidable acceptance that it won't be accomplished. Aronofsky quite brilliantly was able to create a hyper-stylized film circling around human drama and human suffering. Yet when we look closely at what each technique is saying, it offers so much to the film and its characters. Not only did the techniques seen in Requiem for a Dream give us an insight to each of the four characters' horrific experiences, they play off the structure of the film, offering a deeply layered and sentimental approach to a story of sheer despair. With Sarah's story, we see the genesis of addiction, whereas the other characters are already in the depths of their dependence. The first sign comes with a close-up of a box of chocolates, shot in an ominous fashion similar to the way the pills will be shot, a sign of how unsuspecting addiction can approach us. The importance of Sarah's story is that we see the full motion of transformation from free to addict. There's the visual symbolic transformation in the colour of her hair, all in order to fit the metaphorical goal of the red dress.
Call Seymour and tell him to meet me at the beauty parlor. I got the red dress that I wore to Harry's graduation and the gold shoes.
Okay, Mrs. Goldfarb.
The red dress is the perfect connotation to the unattainable abstract dream. As we see in one of Harry's hallucinations, Marion happens to be wearing the same dress, because that's what all of these people are doing. They're striving after that which they can't have, adapting themselves by any means, hoping something works. Requiem is a film about transformation, doing everything in a person's power to get that one thing they want, or in their mind they need. And as our characters change, the film itself undergoes the same treatment. With the camera as a direct link with our subjects, the transformation of any techniques represent the growth and inevitable decay of our characters until their very existence becomes their prison. In the final scene of Requiem, all characters adopt the fetal position. They each regress rather than evolve. The camera rises out beyond the roof, making almost a literal escape from our characters. It no longer identifies with them, and the disconnect between us and them strips their humanity. It's still there, but their circumstances make it so far from their being, they will never let go of this impossible dream. The camera gives up and fades away, and the four subjects that were once addicted to hope show that in the end, there's none.